Hey, it's Anya doula, and welcome back to the Doin Motherhood Podcast, where we talk all things Black mothers today. All right, y'all. So, as you know, I am a birth doula by trade. That is the work that I do week in and week out. And so I missed my studio time this week. But I missed that studio time this week, all thanks to a beautiful baby boy who we all welcomed into the world early this morning. And so, so I do not have a new episode recorded for you today, but what I am sharing is the recording of a live episode I recorded when I was a guest on Sierra McClain. I was on a guest on her In the Key of Life radio show. She is a doula, also here in Houston, and she hosts a radio show that is focused on homeschooling. And so check that out. It's on All Real Radio. And check Sierra out because she's doing, amazing work in our community. And she's just all around a dope woman, a dope mother. She is a community activist, and so I'm happy to share this episode again on the State of Black Motherhood, and it was the killing of Daunte Wright that spurred this conversation about where we are as Black mothers in this social climate of racial uprisings and all of that. So anyway, I'm not going to keep talking because I need to get my rest. But I will be back next week with a brand new episode, and can't wait to have that conversation with you all. But before I go, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and leave a review or a comment on the podcast. I appreciate your listening and would greatly appreciate that feedback from you. I'll be talking to you all soon.
There is so much to cover. It's Black Maternal Health Week. We're actually culminating Black Maternal Health Week today on the 17th. It began on the 11th. Black Maternal Health Week we'll circle back around. It is but one topic that we will cover today on this special edition where we've got our finger on the pulse of Black motherhood. Can't help but, because Anya and myself are both mothers, and today's conversation is going to be all about the state of Black motherhood today, because it's up and down all over the place, all around.
Right.
Like, what are we waking up to today?
And that's the thing, is we don't know what we're waking up to day to day, and most days what we're waking up to is just overwhelming, depressing even. Yeah. I've heard from a lot of my clients this week that they're really struggling, with their own mental health on top of everything else that's going on in their lives.
And on top of, we're still mothering and we're still showing up to mother because there's no days off from that. And so we're going to talk about a lot of things today. There's so many intersections and just so much going on, and we're going to do our very best to get a handle on at least some of it, because this week alone has been major. It's been really, really major. All sorts of things are happening. The news is dominated right now, of course, with the brutal police murder of Daunte Wright.
Yeah. You know, and that it's happening just up the street, it seems, looking at the map. I don't know much about Minneapolis, but right up the street from the trial of the police officer that murdered George Floyd.
Yeah.
And so I can't even imagine for the people who live in that city.
I know.
You know?
But it's like the turmoil day in and day out. And again, I think of the mothers. I think of people who are raising children adjacent to all of these things that have been going on, you know, even regardless of where you stand on what side of any issue, there's been a lot of protesting happening and a lot of violence. And I can only imagine what parents of children in the cities where, you know, these marches have been taking place, in some places for months, and it hasn't stopped.
Right.
And what that's like, the effect that has on them, on their children, day in, day out, you know.
And hasn't stopped because police murders continue. And there seems to be even an uptick in what we're seeing. And not that means that it's new. Right. But just that more people are reporting, more people are talking about it. It's all over the news at this point because clearly something needs to be done. And hopefully we'll be able to offer, you know, just some pointers on, you know, the conversations you can have with your children, some pointers on how mothers can take care of themselves as we're bracing ourselves for whatever comes next.
Yeah, we're definitely going to touch on that because it can't just be always the harshness.
Right.
The harshness. I'll just leave it at that. It can't be that always. There has to be some sort of solace that we're able to find somewhere in something. Something has to be beautiful still. And we can get lost in the news cycles, and you don't even have to watch the news, really. Like, we can get lost. Mostly, I think most people now probably are lost in the social media cycle.
Yeah, definitely.
More than anything else.
Definitely.
And so, and how do you get around that in this day and age? You know, I'm a millennial, and I know the magnetic pull of the internet.
Yes. And the other thing is that so much of our lives get tied to it, you know? And so your password for whatever website goes through your Facebook. And so it's like, no matter what, as much as you can try to avoid it, at some point during your day, you're going to come across it.
Whether you want it or not. We just had that happen before we got on the air. You know, I'm scrolling in my iPad and Apple News just really wants me to know about Prince Philip and the British royal family and all of their, you know, occasions and things. And I didn't ask for that, but it's just there, like at least 4 or 5 headlines, you know? So that's what it's like though, with everything. We're inundated with information. And thankfully, I will say, there's been more of a focus on mental health, especially Black mental health. I'll say Black and brown, you know, because I think of the beginning of the pandemic, and I really think that our communities saw a need to kind of, you know, be really conscious and aware of one another's mental health. Yeah. And it's tough sometimes because the cycle is constant of these killings and, you know, the violence against us. Yes. Trump was violence against us. That his
for
whole
4
entire,
solid years.
That, in case y'all aren't sure, that was violence against us. So we've been going through a lot.
And that's I'm so glad that you called it violence, because I think a lot of times we think of violence as only being physical violence. And we have to understand that this constant barrage of the Trump years, right? So the Trump years, the constant barrage of Black bodies being murdered on our screens on a loop, all of that is psychological violence.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, even more than, I don't want to compare or, like make one greater than the other. But it's one thing to know that police are murdering Black bodies on a regular basis. It's another thing for them to play it in front of us over and over and over again. That is also violence.
And we don't have to choose that violence. It seems drastic. The only way to avoid it, one of the only ways that I can think of, and that is, stepping away and logging out of it all. Mm-hmm. And that's now seen as like a drastic move. That's daring. But aside from that, it's there in so many ways. I do think that it is possible to exist in these spaces if you're very, very careful.
Yeah. You definitely have to curate. And it's tedious, and it's, you have to take your time and do it. But, there may be times that you have to unfollow those news channels, and there may be times that you have to unfollow certain friends or sometimes even activists, because that's their work, and we are grateful for the work that they do. But if you find yourself falling into that loop and realizing that your mood is being greatly affected by it on a day-to-day basis, you have to mute it, you have to unfollow it, or give yourself certain times, that you'll go on, limit your time that you're on there. We really have to take care of our minds. We really have to realize that that is also a form of violence. The news cycle, we equate watching the news with being informed. And that's not always the case.
Correct.
It's not, it's probably more indoctrination than information.
You're so on point with that, because the news is all sponsored,
Absolutely.
So it's skewed. And especially if we want to talk about revolutionary motherhood, well, we have this responsibility to our children, to, the future, to show up for them as whole as we possibly can. And so giving all of our energy and our time to these sources and getting to the point where, it feels like you're missing something. Yeah. If you're not there, and you almost like an addiction.
It is an addiction. Yeah, it absolutely is an addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are things that you have to weigh out. And I'm glad that we went in this direction that we weren't planning to, because I feel like the cyber addiction is a very, very appropriate thing to discuss with modern motherhood. Yeah. Because it affects our mental health and we don't realize it. Mm-hmm. I've had it happen to me where I step away from the phone and I have this feeling of upset, and it's like, oh, what was I upset about? Nothing even really happened. And I realized, it was something that I saw or that I read.
Right. And that's key, because there was a moment where I realized that I become very upset during the day about things that are on my phone. Mm-hmm. But when I step away from the phone and I'm present in where I am in the moment, whether it's with my children or with my clients or just myself. Yeah. But that there's no upset there. And so we really have to be mindful about how much we're staying in it, and paying attention to our body and listening to our body when we get those cues. Yeah. There are days that I'm scrolling and I'm just like, eyebrows furrowed and jaw real tight,
sore. And I'm like, what? How did I get to this point?
And then I look up in front of me and I'm like, my son's coming in from soccer practice and the mom guy just finished. And, if I look up in my world, we're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are okay in that day.
And it's important to really let that sink in and allow that to allow it, because there's also this call, whether you're a mother or not, if you're a Black woman, there's this expectation that we even have for one another that we're going to always show up. Right. We're going to show up. We're going to be right in somebody's face. And online that comes out as, are you participating in the reposting or this email campaign, or like, what have you done?
Right.
What are you doing?
Right.
And you have to perform something.
Right.
You know, and it doesn't always feel good.
It doesn't always feel good. And it gets into that comparison game where, you know, there's an expectation or this idea that if others are not doing it the way you're doing it, or saying the things that you're saying, they don't care.
Yeah.
They're not paying attention. And I think we need to give each other grace in realizing that, one, we carry enough in our regular everyday life to not have to add that burden. That is not Black women's burden to carry. Not every single one of us, not on a day-to-day basis. Correct. We don't have to carry that baggage every single day. But also, everyone that has their own form of activism, and everyone has their own form of, you know, like their own revolutionary act. And for some people, that's showing up to their corporate workspace, being exactly who they are with their natural hair, with their locks, to say, I belong here exactly the way I am. For other people, that's them sitting at the table, at the big tables, writing policies and making sure that Black families and Black women are being kept in mind. For other people like us, we're in the community. Yeah. We're doing this type of work. You know, we're doing our doula work.
I feel like all I need to do to carry out my revolutionary act is to be fully present with my children.
Absolutely.
And like pour into them, and you know, maybe I'll get a book out that is really, you know, meaningful, and have that time with them, and just like loving on them, loving my children, and just being happy and present with them, and knowing what that's building on the inside of them. And I feel like that's that revolutionary motherhood, daring to be Black and still exist and be happy in your existence is a revolutionary act.
So that your children see it, because when they grow older, they will be able to walk even stronger and even taller and with more courage. Yeah. And it's what they have to do. It's what we have to do for them.
We're showing up for the moms still as birth workers. Listen, someone has to be by these mothers' side. You know, what's happening there is so sacred, so necessary, you know, for our very future existence. Yes. And I definitely feel that way, you know, when I'm pulled away from whatever is going on, because I think we spend time like split, you know. Yeah. There are times when we're mouthpieces and you know, they're on the front lines, and we know how to bring it if it needs to be brought. But
and some days I need to just lay on my couch.
Right. Exactly.
Sometimes I just want to watch HGTV because that seems like the safest thing on right now.
You know what I mean? You know, and we should be able to do that because we're defining ourselves for ourselves. That's self-determination. And in motherhood, I think self-determination is so critical, so you don't lose yourself in any kind of way. Right now, it's mainly, you know, this cyber world. Another thing I see of Black motherhood is this urge to, in that same vein, sort of a feeling like we have to do something. Also a feeling like we have to be. I just want to touch on this for a second. We have to be something or look like something other than what we are.
Speak on it.
You know what I mean? Especially seeing the pregnancy and postpartum related content that all of the cookies bring to my feed on everything. And, you know that there are real women who are sitting at home crying because they don't feel like they can achieve the physical ideal they see there. And they just got done having this C-section or whatever kind of birth, you know, are struggling through the beginning of motherhood and then having to deal with that on top of it all, you know?
Yes. That pressure to look like everyone, that race to that whole snapback culture. And
it's unhealthy.
And I'm a very strong believer in allowing people to do what they need to do to feel good about themselves, right? We need to be able to walk tall. When we walk out of our houses, you don't know what you're running into outside. We don't know what it is that we're running into. We don't know. And so, and we know how Black women do. We step. We gonna come. Hair's gonna be laid. I told Sierra today I walked out without stuff because I was trying to be cute.
But you're cute.
I am
cute. You don't have the mic,
but you're cute. So we need that, but we have to be careful about, are we doing it because this is what makes us feel good and helps us show up in confidence and helps us walk that walk that we need to walk, right? For our children, for ourselves, or are we doing what we think other people are expecting us to do? Yeah. And that's it's a really hard balance. It's a really hard line, right? To see.
Yeah, I think especially for a new mother, I see this a lot where there's familial pressure to, do things a certain way, either, with your birth choices or the way you choose to raise your child or things you choose not to do in raising your child. And there's this, you're torn because, the pressure is coming from people you love and trust. And these are the people who raised me and, they love me and they love the child and, all of that kind of pressure. And that's one of those things that I always tell my clients, like, you got to get your parenting confidence up and learn how to bucket. But it's something that we're up against with motherhood and, compounded with, again, the constant media cycle that affects us all in some kind of way. And you just want to make sure you're doing the right thing then. The world is crazy. I just want to make sure I'm making all the right choices and, doing it all right. And no one wants to mess up. But
we have that boundary conversation with my doula clients. We have a community. And last weekend we had a meetup. And that was one of the things that came up as a challenge that they're facing is how to set those boundaries. Yeah. You love your mom raised you and you feel good about, what she's doing, but what she's asking you or telling you to do with your baby or within your household is, it's a different value set from the family you're creating yourself, right? And so managing those boundaries. And that's the other thing that, when we're talking about preparation for pregnancy, we get caught up in the birth. We get caught up in, we get caught up in, those early postpartum when things are rough, right? And we're telling people what they need to have and what they need to do. Right. But we have to also remember that there is a huge transition happening and relationships shift. Yeah. And it is a hard shift to navigate if you don't have those tools and if there's not someone on your side preparing you for what that shift looks like. And so going back to the mental health piece, I think one of the things that came out during the pandemic or that has been very good for our community is seeing the licensed counselors and therapists that are offering their services at low charge, and I mean very low charge.
Or even free. I've seen some. Taraji Henson's program was offering free services.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But we have so many local therapists, and I can think of I don't know if we're allowed to shout people out. There's Obsidian Counseling here in Texas. And the beautiful thing about it is that you can be in one city and they can be in another city, but because it's, throughout the state, they're licensed throughout the state. So we can help in that way. We can help or they can help us virtually. There's another one here local, Masterpiece Wellness. They've been offering very affordable counseling services virtually. Yeah. And so I just encourage you all to tap into those resources. Yeah. They're all over Instagram. So, when you're scrolling, stop scrolling the news, scroll for the help.
Right. Look for that. Exactly. And you know what? click a hashtag. If you click on one of those hashtags, then all of a sudden a bunch of stuff that's related to it will keep popping up. That's how it works with the negative stuff. You accidentally click on some foolishness and all of a sudden you're inundated with it. You know? To switch gears slightly, but sort of not, foolishness, being inundated with the news of one of these fools who was responsible for the murder of Breonna Taylor has gotten a book deal.
I don't know. I saw that and then I just had to turn away. Like I literally just put my phone down and walked away from it. And I wonder how much more do they think we can take? And here's the thing. We know who we are as Black women. We know who we've been throughout history, right? So can we endure it? Will we endure it? Yes, we will. Will we rise above it? Absolutely, we will. It's, you know, someday, one day, will we see victory? Absolutely, we will. But right now, this is a lot. It's
a lot. I feel like it's when, you know, you take off the bulletproof vest and you realize they may not have penetrated all the way, but there's some indentions, you know, and what are those indentations going to do in the long run? You know, we have a history of internalizing trauma and carrying it with us. You know, we pass it from generation to generation. And, you know, this time, if we're not mindful of our mental health, we will continue to do that. And your mental health is your physical health, okay?
Yeah.
To my pregnant moms, you know, the way you feel will affect what your body is able to do, you know, and everything you feel, you're holding it in your body in some kind of way, pregnant or not. And we have to make sure we're going through cycles of release, which is why we're not going to leave this just we're not going to just drop everything heavy on you without giving you any tools. We are going to touch on some ways that you can still seek peace, achieve peace, prioritize rest, prioritize yourself. I'm going to take a break real quick, and when we come back, we're going to switch gears and get really current with it, and we're going to discuss Daunte Wright and Oscar Toledo. I will say, if you've been listening with your children, there will be details shared and things that may not be appropriate for your children. So we'll take a break for a few minutes and you have some time to maybe get them into something else. But we're keeping it real on this very special edition of Homeschool the Key of Life on All Real Radio. Stay tuned, stay with me. There's so much more to come. From what I understand on the same force, I say that to say probably very familiar with their procedures, and had on her right hip a gun, black in color, on her left hip a taser, bright yellow in color,
and much lighter
than the gun. And after 26 years of experience as a police officer, not an understandable mistake to make, but it's claimed that she thought she was tasing him when she put a hole through his chest with her gun. And, you know, there's so much to unpack with that. And it's like, as we're still unpacking the murder of this young father who leaves his family, his mother and father, his girlfriend, his young baby.
To be a single mother
of this young baby, and I think around 2 years old or even less. As we're processing that, I was telling you I saw something online that said we interrupt the broadcast of news about one police murder to bring you news of another police murder.
To bring you news of
another one
police murder. So there's no and so when you said earlier it seems so heavy and it's only been a week and it seems like it's been so long, it's because we don't catch a break.
We don't. And you know, so with Daunte Wright, I mean, I think so much has been said, you know, about this claim with the taser versus the gun. It's so, to me, so blatant. Like, what even needs to be thought about or discussed?
think for me, it's with this particular case, and with each particular case, there's always a thing, right? That I kind of tend to hone in on. And the thing with Dante Wright's story is that all of this started about air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. And I cannot, my brain won't compute why an air freshener calls for a traffic stop.
Yeah.
You know?
And now this young man is no longer alive on the earth. I can see it though when I look at things that have happened to me, you know, and I remember coming home from the zoo after being at the zoo with my husband and children, and my children were even younger. So my oldest was like 3, maybe 3.5. And then I had an infant, and, you know, we have like a cooler and things like that in the car, and we get pulled over feet from home, and I'm driving, and this officer is just on one from jump, and I could definitely see him getting to the point to where he was going to be so agitated. I could see him shooting me or something like that. He had me out of the car, just like barking at me the whole entire time, acting as if I was doing something. Right. And I'm like, look in the car, like I'm with my family, kept asking me if I had drugs and all this. When we let the windows down, as he demanded, and he did look in the back seat, instead of seeing a toddler and an infant, he's giving them the same look that he's giving us, and shining the light into the car with my children, has me out of the car, asking me still about drugs, asked me if I had weapons of mass destruction.
Because so can I just go? Because
I don't even know where would one get a weapon of mass destruction? There?
Like, can I go all the way in?
Riding around in the car?
Because that's not that is not a community servant.
No.
Which is what police are supposed to be. That is a person who has this idea of himself as a superhero, or as this, there's this thing, and I know that there are a lot of police officers who were former military, but there are also a lot of police officers who could not get into the military. And so they take those aggressions into their work every day.
He was so aggressive. He was, it's like if I would have coughed, it could have set him off. I mean, he was asking me things like, you know, do you have any weapons of mass destruction?
Where does that even come from?
And I would repeat it. And when I would repeat his outrageous questions, he would be like, it's a yes or no question. Just on one, like crazy. I could tell I'm dealing with a very volatile person. And even me, you know, as a 5 foot even mom, you know, with toddler and an infant in the car, you know, I could be treated that way. So,
and I'm just curious, Sierra, like, tell us the things that were running through your mind. So you have this police officer yelling at you about weapons of mass destruction from 2000 Saddam Hussein era. Yeah. So like what are the things that are coursing through your mind in that moment?
I was preparing myself for if he was going to like slam me down on the ground or something. He was acting violent to that point. Like anything I said out of my mouth, acting like he just couldn't take it. Like he was going to explode through his flesh. And it was crazy. And another officer came and was standing there, and they were doing the good cop, bad cop kind of thing. And I'm like, what is going on with this guy? Like, someone needs to do something. He's out of control. This is crazy. And he's like, I don't know, you know, everything's going to be fine and all this and that.
Is it?
Exactly. He ends up, after this whole ordeal went on for like half an hour, if not more. And, you know, mind you, we're only feet from the apartment complex entrance. And he eventually came back and told me that the tent on the car had an incorrect percentage. It wasn't legal, the tent. And I'm like, after all of that, and then he did some kind of whack tent test by putting his hand behind it. By this point, the sun was going down. You can't even see anything. This is so bogus and whack. You're not pulling me over because of this tent and then pulling me out, having me on the side of the road, asking me about weapons of mass destruction. I kept saying, you know, I want to get back in the car and check on my children and everything. And he would be, why? Why you want to get back over there so bad? Because I have an infant and a toddler in the car and they're crying.
And you're being a maniac.
Yeah. Yeah. He was absolutely a maniac. This same officer, because I live in an area where, you know, it's not where I want to be. And there's not a lot of us. And I have seen this same officer with Black and brown people pulled over many times. I see him and he has almost like this crazed look in his eye. It's like a thing he does. But when I say that to say, I can see, you know, the predicament that these young brothers are in because they do that to me. And, you know, here I am, but all they see is our skin anyway. And, you know, what I wanted to say about Oscar Toledo is I read that the family was not okay with the video being released yet. And then, you know, the law required the city to release the video footage within 60 days. The family got to see it. And I read that they had 2 days of notice with it. And they weren't okay with it being shared for whatever reasons. It doesn't matter.
Because it's psychological violence.
Yeah. And if there were 60 days, why did they have to do that right away? And my thing too is make it a part of something that is legally able to be requested in the Freedom of Information Act or something, not something that's broadcast across the news. And why does everyone have to see this boy's body crumple and fall to the ground?
Because as I follow Son of Baldwin, and he is an amazing writer, and he has this amazing ability to just get right to the center of what an issue is. And the other day he made a post that said, these videos and the constant loop that they're putting these videos on, that is a souvenir akin to back when they were lynching during the Jim Crow South. Wow. And they would all gather around and take their photos, and they would make postcards of the lynching scenes. They would make postcards of the mutilated bodies. And this might be getting a little bit too much, but the point being that that's what this is.
Yeah.
And so if a family has explicitly stated that they don't want the video, that is he was a boy.
Yeah.
A 7th grader. Now, this is a story that honestly I can't even go there.
Yeah.
And I was the same way about Tamir Rice.
Yeah,
because
it's children.
I couldn't dive into that story.
Right.
It just...
That was that one point for me, though, was just knowing that, you know, the people whose feelings matter in this, it's not the activists, it's not anybody, it's that family.
Thank you.
Who had to lose that little boy. And when I heard that they didn't want to, and there were 60 days, you know, within their policy, then why the immediate? You know what I mean? But like you said, it's that violence. It's violence that is committed against us in so many ways. And so what does that look like in our motherhood? What does that look like in our motherhood when, you know, certain situations have caused us to be in predicaments to where we have no choice but to go to work and take the children to daycare or to school. I get it. As a homeschooler, I get that everybody hasn't figured out a way that they could homeschool and stay home and do that. But I have to say, with that being my platform, that is one of the reasons why. That desire to protect my children from this is one of my reasons for homeschooling, because when we look at the violence perpetuated against Black and brown children, it happens so much in the classroom, and it doesn't happen with the fist. It happens with their words, with the way that they treat these children. And we have to look at it. We have to see it for what it is. And we can't just see it and be like, oh, well, wait until they do it to my child. They do that to my child, it's going to be a problem. It's a problem, period. The first time it ever happens, you know?
Exactly. And I want to just dig a little bit deeper under the surface, what it means when we say how it affects motherhood. So when we're talking about Oscar Toledo, when we're talking about Tamir Rice, when we're talking about Trayvon Martin, when we're talking about all and I'm speaking specifically in this moment of the young children who have been taken. So first, that's the immediate violation that this mother has to find out that the child that she whatever she went through to conceive this child, all the preparation that she took in preparing her body and nurturing her unborn child. When we talk about those first days and nights, how it is, you're bonding and you're so in love with your baby, but you're also exhausted. You're putting in that work and all the work that continues. So that's the first violation, is that this child is just immediately gone for there's no reason. Yeah. Right. It's not like there was an illness. Right. It's not like
just snatched.
And taken so traumatically and so violently. And to know that your child suffered and likely saw it, right? But then there's now what's happening. The constant loop playing, people using their child's name to make political points. Yeah. People using their child's name and image to sell an agenda, whatever the agenda is. And even with the activists, sometimes I wonder if they're being as careful, right? And I know that they have work that they have to do, but how far?
Yeah. Yeah, because in past situations, I have seen interviews with families, and they are, they're out there in the streets pleading with the community, please not. And I think that is a fine line to have to tread when you're doing activist work, and not putting your own ego before the family's wishes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that child is still their child. Yeah. And so then they watch their child become commoditized for whoever and everyone else's benefit. Yeah. And they're still sitting at home entrenched in the pain and the sorrow and the anger and everything else. And then that's just mama dealing with herself. If there are other children,
father,
how is she able to show up for them?
Right.
How are those children showing up in their lives when they go to school?
Yeah. And, people have a right to grieve however they want to grieve. And people have a right to be even in a stage of grief where they don't want constant reminders. That's a valid thing for them. If that's what they want, that's a valid stage. And imagine having to, have one of these cases that just becomes notorious, and it's tough because it's everywhere.
Well, that's something that you hear a lot of people say, just in the stages of grief anyway, is that a lot of times it's hard for them. Like, they can only look at pictures on their own time when they intentionally want to, but to see a picture just flash up or pop up, the anxiety that brings them. And so, no, I cannot imagine what it would be to turn on your television, look at your phone, go outside, and your child's face and name is plastered all over every newspaper and posters, and you're just trying to get through a day.
Yeah. I think of that even, with the mother of George Floyd's daughter, because she didn't ask to be the solo parent on this earth for her child. Whether or not you choose to have a relationship with a person is one thing, but from all accounts, he was a part of his daughter's life. Yeah. And so she was robbed in that same way, and she was forced into this position where she is now. And with this whole situation, I have to say, I've been trying to be very mindful not to think of or refer to this situation as the George Floyd trial.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that perpetuates this idea that he is on trial, which is the game that they have been trying to play, but he is not on trial. And I saw someone say, you know, I'm sure he would have wanted to plead the fifth as much as you guys have him on trial now. Oh, but wait, he can't because Derek Chauvin murdered him. And now he gets the opportunity, the privilege to, you know, plead the Fifth Amendment.
And have the justice system work for him in a way that he stole from another human being. Because now he gets to play the cards that he threw out for himself.
Right.
But George Floyd did not have that option.
No, he didn't. And the mothers in his life, you know, and George Floyd's whole case is just so profound to me, you know, the way he was calling for his mother there. I think we all felt that and have felt attached to this situation in some way. You know, it sparked something a year ago. And I think that his murder definitely is a huge reason that the state of Black motherhood in 2021 is what it is.
Yes.
You
Absolutely. know? Like the meme that we've seen floating around ever since his life was taken is that every mother, when he yelled mama, that every mother heard the call.
Yeah.
And so where do we go? You know, where do we go? So we hear the call, you know, and I think what we've been witnessing or the way that these things have gone ever since, you know, the first time I really got clued in was with Trayvon Martin, where it was actually Sean Bell back in 2004 in New York City. I was living there. He was murdered on his wedding day. And from there, it seems, you know, I can remember like case by case, but it was Trayvon Martin that really sparked a huge outcry from, I don't want to say that, not like the Black community doesn't spark a huge outcry every single time, but there was something that touched us, right, with Trayvon. And so I see this again with George Floyd, but how do we get out of this cycle of it happens, we're outraged, we pour into the streets, we have the conversations on political television shows, and then that name fizzles away, and then a new hashtag name comes up, and now we're all in on that one, and it's been this ever going loop, and I don't have an answer. I wish I did. I don't have an answer, but I think that's a question that we as Black mothers can just within our communities. Like, what can we do to break that cycle, the helpless cycle of watching and then waiting for the next one, and then watching and then waiting for the next one, and feeling complete and utter despair
I feel
every
like
time.
Because we're in America, that's America with 3 Ks. Because we're here, we know that it's likely not going to stop. And so I think that switch happens when we pivot and decide the way we will consume it, because it is a never ending cycle, and it will always probably be like that, if not even more invasive soon. We have to decide how we're going to deal with ourselves, you know, and when we really start to decide how we're going to deal with ourselves, protect ourselves, keep ourselves grounded, then I think that it doesn't change us from being affected and hurt by it. But I think we find ourselves at least better able to put it into perspective and to be able to find ways to still go on, because, you know, like we touched on before, the motherhood doesn't stop throughout all of this. No. You know, as tired as we get mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, the motherhood doesn't stop. And so we have to continue to show up.
The motherhood doesn't stop, and the racism does not stop everywhere else. So we are watching these stories and having to contend with what we can do for our children in our home and, you know, having the talks and all of that. But then we leave our homes to go to work, and then you have to deal with the microaggressions and the racist bullying and the double standards and the higher expectations placed on Black women when they're in the workplace. And then you go to the grocery store, and then you have to deal with, right?
Do I in Kingwood? Just going to the store.
And so you're getting hit at every single turn. But everywhere you go, as a Black woman, everyone is expecting you to show up. But it's not enough to just show up. We got to show up. We have to produce. We have to stay in a good mood.
Right. Right.
Don't you dare frown. Right.
So as not to be threatening. You know,
no matter what's coming at you, we're expected to maintain absolute grace and composure. And then when we're not, right?
Yeah. And you know, that was an unintentional segue, but that I think that's going to segue us into Black Maternal Health Week and what we have to talk about. We have some things to talk about.
I'm just like, what y'all want us to do?
You know what I mean? It's upsetting me and my homegirls. It really is. But we're gonna pivot ourselves, and we're gonna move on to Black Maternal Health Week. We're going to share just some of the issues because the issues are plenty, and also going to share with you the story of a mama whose Black maternal health struggles are not what you may always think of when we think of the Black maternal health crisis, but they're definitely absolutely a part of that. And it's going to shed some light on a situation that we all need to pay close attention to. And that's going to be dealing with racisms and racisms. Well, yeah, there's some, those racisms, baby.
Multiples, plurals, all
racism
the time.
And the NICU. Okay. So make sure you stay tuned. You're listening to All Real Radio. Maybe you're online at www.allrealradio.com. Or maybe you have the app and you're all fancy. Either way, I want you to stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. This is heavy. I encourage you to take a break as well.
Go outside.
Take some deep breaths, you know, have a piece of fruit.
Yeah, drink some tea.
Okay? We'll be back in a few minutes. It's going to be all right, y'all. We're going to be all right.